Welcome to Beyond the Backlog, where we look at thrilling tales of gaming triumphs, both past and present, exploring the strategies, challenges, and unforgettable moments that shape the ever-evolving landscape of our digital adventures. I'm Nick.
And I'm Zack.
And today we're trying out something a little different for one. Different kind of recording setup. Might be a touch bit of a delay, but that's okay. We'll make it work. And today we're going to go after April's games that we beat.
All right. Was there any games that came out in April first off, or any gaming news that stuck out to you that you're interested in?
I think the biggest one is just I play a lot of, I forget what kind of games they're called, but Europa Universalis 5 was announced, which is one of those Paradox big map, like historical games.
Okay.
I call it like a spreadsheet simulator. So we've been talking about that as we get a little group together and just play through that, and that should be pretty fun. But that's probably like 3 years out, 2 years out, maybe.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, yeah, it was just announced in April this year.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm expecting maybe next year, but who knows?
Mm-hmm. I think the only game that came out that I was interested in is Harold Halibut, and it's like a claymation style, handmade characters, but like a point and click adventure. It looks really cool.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds super neat. There was another one too. It's the Dark Souls crab game. I just forget what it's called off the top.
Another Crab's Treasure.
That's it.
Yeah, that one does look really, really cool as well, and like a more lighthearted, cartoony take on that formula.
Yeah, so we'll see if it's difficult enough and it's not just it's the Souls game, then I'll be pretty contented.
Mm-hmm. Did you purchase any games this month?
I did not. I was looking.
A good boy. I did make one little purchase, and that was picking up Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced 2, Grimoire of the Rift. What a mouthful of a title that is.
There is very JRPG.
But that one's on DS, and I think I'm going to give it a go while I'm away for field school for 11 days. I'm going to take that with me. It's going to be my RPG for next month.
Ooh, that's a good call. Yeah, I started the Octopath Traveler, and I figure that's going to be a long enough one, so that's why part of the reason why I have so few games actually beat is I figure, you know what, if I get a couple of long games done, makes it a little bit more worth it, even if the number doesn't go down quite so much.
Fair enough. But the RPG that I did play this month is actually Rune Factory 4.
Yeah.
So when I got into this game, I was sitting there hoping it would be like a big variety of skills and tasks to complete kind of at your own pace in this big open world version of a Harvest Moon. And it is officially considered a spin-off. And the version I played it on 3DS, I think 4 was ported over to Switch recently, or I might be imagining that because 3 and 5 definitely are. But it's a farming simulator at its core, but there's a good emphasis on other aspects around it, like combat, fishing, mining, smithing, crafting. You can like make medicine. And I was super excited because these are all skills that you can do in RuneScape.
Yeah.
And I was hoping they would synergize together like they do in RuneScape, but you don't really get that sense of something like catching fish means you need you'll get better fish that require a better cooking level to make dishes that heal more food and have better effects. Like there's a little bit of that, but the way that they assess whether you can cook something or complete a task successfully is whether you have enough mana or rune points in this case to spend on it. And if you're below the level, it just costs extra.
Okay, so instead of having it be, you know what, if I feel like just spamming out something, it doesn't quite work as well. You have to kind of generalize a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of the time you don't get that choice of like, it's not like I'm going to catch a bunch of low-level fish and build up until I can catch better fish. It's just you get the random selection of what you get pretty much.
Okay.
But even beyond that, everything in the game is kind of given to you step by step. Like you don't have to grind out money to afford your farming tools. It's just like tutorial after tutorial on here's how to use this, here's how to use this. And I didn't really feel like I had that chance to just go out and explore the world on my own.
Yeah.
And every skill that you level up also just increases your overall health and your overall rune points that you can have. So rather than feel like I was progressing and grinding out levels longer and longer, it's just like everything stays roughly the same pace and balance the entire way through because it's a very linear balance between everything.
Mm-hmm. And is
But
that
beyond
kind
that,
of a good thing or a bad thing?
I would say it's good if you just want to get in and experience the story. There's not going to be any stops and grinds. But I think what I was hoping for was something a little different, more on the side of RuneScape, where it is grind out a couple hours to get a better level so you can do a quest that will give you some cool reward.
Okay.
Whereas this is just very linear story progression, and there's actually 3 different stories. But after I finished the first one, I didn't feel like just playing the game until the next one happened, because it is a random chance when the actual prompt will lead you on to the next story path.
Yeah, that just seems really silly.
So I felt comfortable saying it's beat at the point I saw the credits roll. Um, and I'm going to probably pick it up, especially as I said, if I'm going to be away for a few days and have several hours at night to kind of kill, I might just play a little bit more and see if I do get to the next story part.
Yeah, exactly. It's more going to be a handheld kind of month. So,
And I think part of that is because after beating that first story arc, I don't really have a sense of what to do or where to go right now. It's just literally just do menial tasks until something happens. And beyond that, though, I did like the characters and I like the art and I did like the story I played, but I was a little disappointed overall.
yeah. Yeah, because it's kind of the expectations of it, right? Like there doesn't seem to be a lot in the sense of goal orientation.
No, and if I wasn't still getting tutorial type tasks to do, I think it would be more interesting if it was like find this particular fish that's a high level you need to catch or something. But it's quite literally like tame 5 monsters, and your reward is a brush that you can use to tame more monsters.
Okay. Yep. So a little bit more like it falls into the classic RPG trope of why am I doing these quests?
And I just like I really want to love the game. I just didn't love the game.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. It might change my opinions on trying to get a Rune Factory game just to try out.
I definitely still would recommend playing it. Like playing the game is fun. It's just maybe not a complete it kind of game.
Yeah. Yeah, like a 7 out of 10 kind of thing.
Yeah. Pretty solid 7 out of 10 for me.
Nice. Nice. And I guess on that note, too, I will go over my 12 and 12 game that I beat. My game for April was the. Is it a Legend of Zelda? Zelda 2 Adventures of Link.
Yes, it would be considered a mainline Legend of Zelda game.
Yeah. Anyways, the game is interesting. So it's the Zelda 1 was your classic top down. Zelda 2, they tried to do a little bit more what came to be like RPG elements, right? I would look to something like first Final Fantasy or just shooting from the hip here, maybe something like Ultima, the like OG of OGs for it. And it has some interesting ideas, but some of the systems don't really hit.
Like, were you just not into the magic side of it?
Yeah. And I think that's just me as a person, right? The magic, it just seems hard to get the magic.
Especially
Right?
after future Zelda games made it a quick refillable resource that you didn't need for more than like a couple arrows or really specialized attacks.
Exactly. Like I don't see Link as a quote unquote mage, whereas in this game I kind of do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because there's points you have to be a fairy or you have to jump or even the healing in it. Right? There isn't much in the way of healing items. It's I got magic so I can cast to heal. So it was a little bit different to try to wrap my head around. And I think if I didn't use a guide all the way through it, I would have probably stopped.
I honestly, when I played through it, I feel like the hints are pretty straightforward. But
Yep.
if you don't stop and talk to every NPC in every town, you will miss things.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The hints, you know what? The hints are remarkably good for time frame of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main, I don't want to say main issue because it's some people's jam. It's just the game is so dang hard.
I only died a few hundred times. What are you
Yeah,
talking
exactly. And I did it on Switch Online, right? So I had the rewind mechanic.
I honestly don't know how I did it back before Switch Online with the rewind was a thing, but I did beat that game. But the second time I beat it, I used the Switch Online, and it was so much more fun.
Well, that's just it. Like it was such a weird dichotomy between very grindy and like, oh man, I don't like some aspects of this. To you know what, this part was kind of fun. If I got into a role and I started not being able to die as quickly, I was like, this game's kind of fun. I get why people like it.
Yeah, but it's very easy to just get like hit once by a basic enemy, and then you just end up in a loop where you get knocked back 4 or 5 times, and you just kind of you literally feel like your reaction time is just a little off.
Exactly. And even via the rewind, it's just kind of like, okay, well, I'm in the same fight for 10, 15 minutes now because I just can't actually get a hit in.
Mm-hmm.
But it was good. I'm glad I played it because it's a Zelda game that I had never really even touched.
Oh, we like those.
Oh, yeah. And all I've
So
really decided is I get it. I get why I didn't.
Would you recommend it to anyone who likes like vintage games, or is it just a little too obnoxious for you?
Vintage games, I would say yes. If you like Zelda games, I don't think so. Because
Fair
it's
enough.
kind of a black sheep, right?
Yeah, and I definitely think my enjoyment of it comes from my love of all generations of Nintendo and not from my love of Zelda.
Yeah, like I would almost put it as more like kind of like a Castlevania, right? Like an OG Castlevania, more in that sense, right? Side-scrolling action platformer rather than like an adventure game.
Exactly, and that's actually a perfect time to segue, unless you have more to say on that one, into my next kind of pair of games that I'm going to put here because they were both Game Boy games that I played on the Switch Online. The first one was Gargoyle's Quest, which, if you remember in the Super Nintendo episode, me gushing on about Demon's Crest for like 7 minutes there.
Yeah,
Like this is the handheld take on Demon's Crest, even though like I mean it is the first in the series, and Demon's Crest would be the third, but they are so similar. It would be hard not to compare them. Like, and it does have some similarly very excellent pixel art, which is very impressive for like the Game Boy in a way that I think to put another Zelda game in there, like Oracle of Seasons and Ages, I was gushing on about how the pixel art was fantastic in those games.
yeah,
And this is one of the first like Game Boy games, not even Game Boy Color, Game Boy games that gave me that same sense of like, wow, that was really cool. But at its core, it is a 2D platformer where your basic moves are being able to shoot fireballs, jump, and then you have a little float meter, which is a little different from Demon's Crest. Instead of having an endless float and kind of changing your abilities on the fly, it's just like a float meter that you can upgrade with things that you pick up. But this one is very linear. even though it also kind of does the Zelda 2 thing where the actual stages are side scrolling. And in between, there's a little overhead overworld map that you can explore around in. But this is a very linear game. Once you pass through an area, assuming you found the like one or two upgrades that are in each one for your health and your flying meter,
Yeah.
you don't need to go back. You don't need to backtrack once. You don't need to play the same stage ever again. And I think even though the platforming might have been a little tighter at some points than in Demon's Crest, I think it was just there was less variety and it wasn't nearly as difficult. So I didn't remember it quite as well as I will remember Demon's Crest.
Yeah.
But a game that is going to stick out to me is Metroid 2. And that was another one where I was very impressed by how well it plays on Game Boy, how well it translates the first Metroid's gameplay over to Game Boy. And in this one, like the basic goal is to eradicate all of the Metroids on this planet after the first one, where you took a sample of like Metroid DNA back to the lab and they found out it's like has strange multiplying properties, whatever. But it has a very cinematic intro, which I love on the Game Boy. It's so cool to see. And the progression in that game is also very linear, where it's to move on to the next area of the map, you have to kill all the Metroids in that area. And by the time you've done that, you've probably picked up all the missile upgrades and any other upgrades that are like required for progression. So this one also has very little backtracking, which also made it very easy to beat 100%, especially compared to others in the series.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how is it time-wise? Because I know a lot of the times with Game Boy games, they're a little bit shorter than some of their contemporaries on the main consoles.
So get a load of this. You know how a staple of Metroid games is, depending on how fast you beat the game, you get a different ending cinematic?
Yeah.
So I beat it 100%. Got to the end, and I want to say it's 4 hours is the time limit. Where it's like under that, you get Samus fully taking off her suit, and then 4 to 6 hours is just Samus in her suit, and then 6 hours is like the bad ending. I got 4 hours and 1 minute.
Nice.
So I am going to consider that 100% complete because I was 1 minute off of the best ending.
Well, and that's just your first time playing it too, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have played the 3DS reboot, and I did boot it up again just to give it a go, and you can see how many improvements are made to it. But I think playing it on the Game Boy and seeing how it's a bigger game and arguably better than the first Metroid on Game Boy, I think it's just really cool to look back on, and I'm really looking forward to playing Metroid 3, which is Super Metroid.
Oh yeah, that'll be a good one. It's nice that you went kind of in order too. So you get the full experience of it.
All right, but you had another game that you beat this month?
Yeah, I had one other game that I beat this month, and it was a very tentative beat. I took another gander because I know we've talked about randomizers, so I consider Majora's Mask to be beat because I got a couple more words to say on that game now that I've taken a lot more time on it than I originally had.
Oh boy, Majora's Mask, let's go.
Yeah, now I will preface this. I don't know if it really climbs the ranking, but I have a little bit more nuanced takes on why I like and dislike certain things.
What rank did you put it at when we did our top Zeldas?
I want to say 7. Might have been 8.
I think I had it at like number 4.
Yes.
Or 3? I don't remember.
I had it at 9.
Oh, geez. I definitely had it at 4 because I had put Tears of the Kingdom up there.
Yeah, so, and why I said it was basically I didn't like the time system. I found it very, not quite as anxiety-inducing, but I don't like replaying things in the same kind of sessions. Mm-hmm. Right? So in terms of efficiency, it doesn't quite work sometimes for me. But going through from a randomizer's perspective, it gave me a better sense of some of the things, especially when it comes to things like the dungeons. Right. So I originally really just liked Woodfall, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just as a simple dungeon. It's very free flowy. It's easily understandable. And I hated Snowhead is probably the big one, because it's just very confusing and just blah.
As somebody who has played Majora's Mask to death, I am well aware that if you forget one small key at the beginning of Snowhead, you will be stuck for a while.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
but I do love Snowhead.
So here's the thing. When you go through as a randomizer with it, it makes it so much better, because you could have the hook shot, you could have fire arrows already before you even get into it. So what makes it this long dungeon of constant backtracking and hoping that you don't miss certain things becomes a lot more free flowy and has a lot more options to it.
Yeah, I think I would really want to try a Majora's Mask randomizer, but are you doing it just as the Majora's Mask, or is this the crossed with Ocarina of Time when you were talking about?
Yeah, you can do it as both.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, specifically as it pertains to Majora's Mask, it makes it easier because it's a little bit more streamlined. And it's weird that the streamline makes it have more variety and options to it. Because Snowhead, you have to go into the same room like 3 or 4 times. And when you get the fire arrows, all that really changes is those long winding areas become quicker to get through. So if you have to go through because you reset time and you have to beat the bosses again, it makes it easier and quicker.
And I remember you even saying, as kind of a product of that streamlining, say, for example, because you had bosses mixed, right? So beating the boss of a different temple would change the area of somewhere totally different.
Yeah, so the dungeon entrances are changed in the randomizer portions. So Snowhead could be in Woodfall, but when you beat Snowhead, the Snowhead area changes.
Mm-hmm, which means you don't have to do the whole puzzle and main quest mission that would have been required and taken a lot of time to do in order to reach the next temple.
Exactly. And it is a quick little note on Ocarina of Time. It's the same kind of thing. Your standard Ocarina of Time is really just a really bad randomizer because all of your progression items are in really bad spots.
Mm-hmm.
But with Majora, it gave me more of a respect for the dungeons, with the exception of Great Bay Temple. I think that's still just kind of a nightmare to get through.
Yeah, and I think I've played it too many times to be objective about, because at this point, when I go through Great Bay, I know where all 15 of the stray fairies are, so I can do a 100% sweep through in a very optimal path.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, I have warmed up a little bit more to the cycling. And that's basically depending on how you frame it. Right. So I think I'm more okay doing the Anjuin Cafe side quest all through one playthrough and then just resetting and starting it over. I still think it's really silly that you lose all of your consumables, but not all of your consumables.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, why does Link hang on to the bow but loses all the arrows? But if he has a bigger quiver, he keeps the quiver.
Now,
right?
At the start of Majora's Mask, when you're in Clock Town, I always go and collect the 100 rupee, like silver rupee, that's in East Clock Town that you just have to do a little platforming to get to. Is something like that still a reopenable chest?
No. But there are ways to make it a little bit easier for that. But when it's reopenable, it's a nice little kickstart. As well, the inverted Stone Tower area, or just the Stone Tower area, has a lot of pots that give you kind of a little bit of everything too. So it's not too bad on reset. I still think that there are issues with the game, and I don't know if I would put it much higher, but it was a good one. I'm glad that I took the time to play through it more. I just think between the two, I would just go back to Ocarina.
Fair enough, but hopefully one of these days we'll have fully changed your mind and we'll be sitting here gushing about Majora's Mask.
Maybe.
I can dream on.
Exactly.
Right. And I think the last two games that I wanted to talk about was just a little session I was doing, playing some Switch Online, and that was one of the NES games, Gradius and Ghosts and Goblins. So, Ghosts and Goblins, I wanted to look into because I just played Gargoyle's Quest, which is technically a spin off of that.
Yeah.
And I kind of figured at this point I have the other three games that I own in that series crossed off. Let's go do the actual first one. But that game is frustratingly hard. The deaths are punishing. If you have a particular weapon that you want to use, it is so easy to accidentally lose it.
Hmm.
And then just the fact that for being a side-scrolling platformer where you're playing as like the Knight of the Round Table Arthur, I assume, like the fact that you can only take 2 hits of damage and that power-ups that give you more armor or better armor are so rare, it's just like frustrating.
Now, do they also? They still keep you at the 2 hits, right? Because I know in Super Ghosts and Goblins, that's kind of the case until you get to like the highest level armor.
I honestly never reached a point where I already had armor on and was able to pick up more armor. Um, I'm pretty sure it allows you to tank an extra hit, but don't quote me on that as a definitive answer.
Yeah.
Because I did play it with the rewind feature, obviously, but even with that, I still found a moment like in level 6, which is the final level, and it's a climb up this tower where the hardest enemies in the game, the gargoyles that you play as in the spin-off, are swooping left and right on the screen, and like the timing to jump over them is ridiculous, but the only weapon that you have at your disposal while doing this climb is probably the weakest one in the game against them. And if you don't make it through with that weapon, then you won't be able to even see the final boss, let alone the fact that seeing that final boss isn't the real final boss.
It's that classic late 80s, early 90s Capcom, eh?
But yeah, even with that rewind feature on level 6, I still had to take a death and to give it another shot and hope that like the placement of the enemies in terms of the RNG of them moving back and forth wouldn't completely screw me over, because I reached multiple spots where it was physically impossible for me to maneuver my way out without dying.
Mm-hmm.
Even with stop and rewind and essentially like a tool assisted run through, I still had to try it multiple times just to get through, which was just, oh man, I can't stand that. But I do love the games that have been like the sequel to it and the spin-offs of it. I just cannot stand Ghosts and Goblins.
Interesting. Yeah, because like Super Ghosts and Goblins kind of plays the same way, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it looks better, just plays nicer. I think if you haven't played Ghosts and Goblins before, it's not one that you're going to end up putting on your favorite NES games list.
Yeah, nor is it on one that's like, oh, you've never played the NES before? Oh, you should play this one as one of your like 10 games.
Mm-hmm. But one that I was actually surprised by, and I think I would even put on a list of games to check out if you ever just want to try an NES game, is Gradius. So this one's a side-scrolling shooter where like you play as a super tanked out a jet, I guess, that can shoot a absolute hailstorm of bullets. And I'm pretty sure it's a port from like arcades back in the day. But this one is also, yeah, this one's also really, really hard, and you do get lots of slowdown on NES when there's a lot of enemies and bullets flying around. But sometimes it almost feels like you can use that to your advantage, because then you're not accidentally sliding over into a bullet. Like you kind of have a bit of a choppy frame rate that allows you to stop and reverse for a second.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I think the actual design of the levels and like the enemies that you face is really nice, and I would love to give the other games in this series a bigger shot, because I've never been a huge fan of side-scrolling shooters or really good at them, and this
Yeah.
one kind of, I can see why people would have played this back in the day and been excited for more games like it.
Yeah, I would say the Gradius style of like shoot 'em ups are some of my favorites just to kind of pop in for 10, 15 minutes. Couldn't tell you
And
why.
and I really do like the upgrade system where it's like you essentially have 6 different spots at the bottom, and every time you pick up a little dot of like energy, it moves one spot up, and whatever it's highlighting when you press the special button will use that effect. So if it's a 6 out of 6, you become invincible for a little bit. Like 3 and 4 allow you to swap between like missiles versus laser beams. Just some, and like one is a speed up that you can use to maneuver around things, and it really helped in a couple of tight spots where I wasn't sure if I was going to keep up with the screen, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And
But
yeah,
I did really like that one. Yeah, and I definitely want to try. I think there's another one on Super Nintendo, if I
yeah.
recall,
So
like Gradius 3, maybe.
Gradius 3 is on Super Nintendo. That one I own. Gradius 2, I think, is arcade, and PC is mostly where that went to.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you if it was on anything else.
Yeah, and then the later ones in the series look to be just kind of arcade ones, which is kind of interesting. And then Gradius 5 was PS2.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then they just kind of...
Yeah, most like side-scrolling shooters just kind of fell off the face of the earth after like the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1 generation.
Yeah, or they went more like the bullet hell route, right? Like the Toho games.
Yeah.
But those ones I think are like really the pinnacle of arcade. Right? Those are the ones that I think if I was growing up in the 80s or 70s into 80s, those would have been my jam.
Absolutely. I definitely would have put quite a few quarters into a machine at the local arcade.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Gradius and things like Centipede, Space Invaders, I would have just played the crap out of them.
Ghosts and Goblins, though, I would have literally tried like twice and then been like, screw this.
Yeah, that's how I feel about even just like the TMNT arcade games too. Any of the beat 'em ups, just kind of like, yeah, these are kind of fun. Maybe if I was there with a friend of mine, sure, but on my own, nah. But now, do you have any games you think you're going to get into other than the Final Fantasy Tactics A2 for next month?
Yeah, so going to be only playing on 3DS for the first 11 days because I do leave for a trip. And yeah, I'm going to hopefully get through as much of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance as we can. And then if I do have time later, I know I said it way back in like February, but we'll get into Super Metroid finally.
Yeah, that works out. I'm thinking myself, I want to keep doing Octopath and then going into a little bit of maybe Sonic Heroes for my 12 and 12. So I think that's the shortest one that I have.
Excellent choice. And beyond that, I also am almost done a couple of other games that I've been actively playing, but we'll get into those at the end of April, I guess.
Exactly.
Or end of May. This is the end of April.
This is the end of April.
Yep.
But that's it. That's all. Let us know how you like this different setup, different kind of vibe to it. And then we'll see what we got next time.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Take care.